Thank you, Karen Corder, and just thank you to the ministers for this useful debate. And just Deputy McGuinness is in the chamber. He has campaigned for this for quite a long time, just to acknowledge that. But we need to see firm actions out of this as well, Minister. It can't just be a talking shop on a Thursday evening to fill in the Dáil schedule, because the banking sector has shown most enormous changes, not just in the last 10 years, but particularly over the last 5 years. When you see a huge change, in even all of us in this chamber, I would imagine, the move to online banking, away from the traditional branch banking, from the traditional human relationship, but also the aftermath still of the financial crash of 2008, 2009, 2010, the role that banking played in that, the consequences that had in this country and on people's lives, the tracker controversy, which eroded so much trust and confidence that had already been eroded by the previous crash. And when you saw how long it took to resolve that, how long it took for the banks to actually fess up to that, and what they put families through, what they put people through, what they were willing to do to customers who are citizens of this state in order to avoid responsibility, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. And it eroded trust in a way that maybe even the events of 2008, 2010 didn't, because you saw the way that banks were going to treat people individually. So when you put it all together, this is a tumultuous time for banking. And I want to pick up on a point that Deputy Nash raised. That tumult seems to be coming down on the shoulders of bank staff, and that is completely out of order. So we saw in the case of Ulster Bank, when they made the announcement about that they were pulling out, their staff, who had been loyal staff, excellent staff, who had been the front face of an organisation that had had a lot of controversy over years, their staff heard about the pull-out decision on national media. And similarly, where there have been cutbacks in other banks, staff seem to be the last to hear, rather than be consulted about their own lives, their own futures. And I think, Minister, there needs to be a very firm message sent to banks that in this time of transformation and tumult, they must recognise their staff as being partners in any decisions that are taken, rather than passengers, as being central to decision rather than being an AOB item. And from our engagement with the Financial Services Union, it is very clear that bank staff around this country feel like passengers. They don't feel like they're central. And a message from government needs to go very clearly that is not acceptable. As I said, Minister, the tracker controversy and the willingness of the banks to treat customers and to treat families in the way was absolutely appalling. But we are still seeing it in many instances around the country. So yes, they were proactive at the beginning of COVID in terms of the payment break, but now the mantra is come and talk to us, come and talk to us. And yes, that makes sense when you say it, but we all know that for many personal customers and for many business customers, they will stick their head in the sand and not engage because the banks do not make it easy to engage. And there is a fear of engaging with banks. And there needs to be much more proactivity around that. So I would cite the pyrite and mica situation that we are facing in Mayo and in Donegal and Sligo at the moment. Mortgages held by banks, owned by banks, and part of the capital base of banks are directly affected by crumbling houses. The asset on which the mortgage is held is devalued by pyrite and by mica. Yet we found a reluctance on proactivity in the part of the banks to actually reach out to families, to reach out to affected homeowners, to say, come and talk to us, and come and speak to us, and to actually be proactive in doing that. And it took some engagement with them for them to realise what was happening. So you have a number of different effects there. You have the asset base of the banks being affected and being devalued. You have the customers whose daily lives are absolutely horrific going through this. Another pressure was dealing with the banks and their unwillingness to deal with the banks, and the fact that there was a fear of dealing with the banks. And proactivity from the outset would have resolved that fear. Proactivity from the outset would have been a much fairer way of dealing with it. And that proactivity is beginning to be there now, but only in some cases. And it needs to be far greater and far more energetic. The last number of years have been transformed and been marked by a number of international pullouts. And I think, Minister, it will be worthwhile in terms of the review to see banks keep getting accused in this country of making massive profits. They keep getting accused of running away with profits, etc., but yet we are not seen as a viable location for retail banking or for business banking. When you see the NatWest pulling out after over 100 years of service, when you see KBC pulling out, you see all of the, to leave us with the AIB and Bank of Ireland model. You have to ask yourself questions. We all have to ask ourselves questions. And yes, the online banks such as Revolut and N26 are coming in slowly, but there is a reluctance on many people to go to them for a full banking service. And while that reluctance is there, the existing two banks, who will be the only ones left in the market, will play to that and will give us the kind of thing where we have the most expensive mortgage rates in Europe, where our business loans are much more expensive than the actual cost of lending, where the level of service that we get as consumers and the level of product we get as consumers is not what it should be in a kind of country that we are in. And until that changes, Minister, until we understand the reasons why banks are not entering the Irish market and make the changes that are necessary, then our consumers and our businesses and our communities will suffer. When banks make the decision to pull out, they turn their backs on communities. And it is very easy to say, oh, people will go online. It is very easy to say people will go to the post office and do their banking. Well, firstly, for a lot of communities, where, for instance, Bank of Ireland are currently closing down branches, they are the last retail branch, not just in that town, but in that region. And Bank of Ireland are saying to them, go to your local post office and do your business in your local post office. But in cases such as in Ballyhonus, such as in Charlestown, such as in Kelshima, such as in Tubbercurry, which is in County Sligo, but all in the same region of Mayo and Sligo, the post office is in a local supermarket. It is not an appropriate place to do face-to-face banking, particularly where there is a confidential nature of banking. And the post office the staff and managers weren't even informed that this was coming at them before the announcement was made. So they weren't in a position to deal with the initial queries that came in. And that, again, as an example, shows that customers and consumers are a long way off banks' agenda in the same way as staff. Customers and consumers of banking services should also be partners as opposed to passengers. But no, they're lumped in with staff as the last to know, as decisions are taken far away. And I think, Minister, given the fact that the state is a main shareholder in, for instance, Bank of Ireland, but the same approach and the same view should be taken to Ulster and NatWest, that way where they are leaving a community, and given what the taxpayer has contributed to keep those banks floating, that the building that they are leaving should be offered to the community as a trust, either through the trust in the community or to the local authority, for development maybe as an e-hub, a community hub, a broadband connection point, within which, with a little bit of imagination and a little bit of thinking outside the box, banking service could be delivered. Not in a supermarket, not in a hatch beside the fruit and veg, but in the existing building, which has the equipment and the IT, could become a community hub to offer a lot of IT facilities, including banking, rather than the building being sold and added to the shareholders of the bank that is departing the community. And I think, Minister, that's something I'd like to see pursued. I welcome your commitment, and your personal commitment to the credit union movement is well known. I know that you're pursuing that, and you see the value of the credit union movement. But credit unions right across the country are absolutely mad to go lending at the moment. They want to do proper, responsible lending, but they're finding that they can't. And many communities, many customers and businesses want to avail of that power, but they can't. We speak of community-based banking. We have a model in our credit unions, but we're not giving them the powers, we're not giving them the energy, we're not giving them the ability to be that community banking force in contrast and as competition, and as proper competition to the two effectively remaining banks. So we need a complete change of view to our credit unions. They need to be seen once again as a partner in banking, as a partner in our economy, as a partner in community and community regeneration, not as a passenger. Business banking, Minister, continues to be enormously challenging. Cost of funds, the cost of product is quite much more than in many markets. I'm sceptical about the way in which the credit guarantee scheme is being rolled out. And I don't think it is having the kind of impact that it should be having in the context of COVID and COVID lending. And I'd ask for much more engagement from government about that product to see how it is rolling out, and that we have franchised out effectively state-backed lending to the banks. Is it doing what we want it to do? Is it giving the kind of support to businesses that we need it to give? And I think a hard, honest look needs to be taken at that within the coming weeks, not in the coming months. And finally, Minister, the whole area of green products. If we are moving people into major investment in their homes and businesses to decarbonise, our banking system needs to move with them. It needs to expand considerably its product range at the moment, not just greenwash products and greenwash existing loan products, but actually make them accessible, encourage people to take them up, make them competitive in terms of price, reflect where people are at in terms of their family experiences. So, Minister, there's a lot to consider. Tonight's debate should only be a start, not just a full stop and not just a box ticked to keep Deputy McGuinness and keep the rest of us who've been looking for this debate happy for a few weeks. It needs to be something meaningful and needs to be a signal that this Dáil takes banking reform seriously.